Hello. Um, this is the second battle report from the BYG tournament in Denmark, and this is a retelling of my game against Manuel, the current ruling world champion, um, who is a very, very good player and who had brought a very interesting list. It was a multi-launcher spam list that was utilizing a German theater, and it was really good. If you don't, you can go and watch my video on his list. I've reviewed that list. We got matched up in the second round. We had both won our first game. I think Manuel had been paired up against Steen, who is a mid-tier Danish player, and I had been paired up against BYG, who is a mid-tier Danish player. Both of them are really experienced, but maybe not very, very competitive. So we have both won our first game. And I think we were basically number like 2 and 3 at that point, or maybe 3 and 4. So we knew that whoever won this game was going to go on and do well in the tournament. And we were playing sectors, and we got a horrible table. Not that there was anything wrong with the terrain, it looked beautiful, but it was highly skewered to Manuel's advantage in my eyes, because we got a table that was on one side completely open and on the other side was all buildings. So bringing a multi-launcher list on that table, you could see everything and you could shoot at half of the table was just one kill zone, while the other half of the table was completely open, so you could also shoot at that. Oh man, I knew that game was going to be rough going into it. I really was... When I saw the table, I was like, shit, this is not going to work at all. It turned out to be quite an exciting game, and it got much closer than I thought it would go, but Manuel beat me. So let me talk you through the terrain, and then what the tactical decisions was from my perspective. And Manuel, if you are watching this, then I hope you will give your own thoughts on what happened and why you were doing what you were doing. That is always interesting. So this is sort of a rough sketch of the terrain that we were facing. Manuel won the role for who choose sectors, and he chose to deploy in this sector up here, which meant that I got and that was a perfect tactical decision in my eyes. What he was doing was he was giving himself some cover while he was making sure that he could move into the neutral zone from there and have line of sight down and shoot. While if I was moving into his zone, everything that I was moving in there would be close to a house somewhere. So I was going to get shot up by his multi-launchers no matter what happened. Perfect tactical decision. I would have done the same had I used Manuel's list. I did not, which meant... So we have these like rough edged, that was some forests. Unfortunately, those forests were all pretty close to the edge, so none of them gave line of sight blocking, really. I had one forest over here that gave me some line of sight block, and I placed my artillery observer behind that one. And then we had some trench lines running like next to each side of the board here, which meant that I could deploy in the trench line, giving me hard cover. But unfortunately, from there, I could go nowhere because there was all this open ground in between. And yes, there was some cover on that, like little hills, but not a lot. Really, really sparse cover. Everything could be seen anyways. And then we had this river running down through the whole board, which meant that if I wanted to press into Manuel's deployment zone from my deployment zone, I was going to have to go through rough ground, slowing my attack, slowing my charge ranges for my Gurkhas, all of that. So perfect placement for Manuel. He placed almost all his troops here and here in two large lumps. Infantry and one of your multi-launchers, or did it come on turn 2, Manuel? I forget. At least there were these two lumps, right? And I placed my Gurkhas down here. And unfortunately, I had to deploy some of my trucks in sectors. You have to deploy 50% of your army. So I had to deploy some of my trucks. I deployed them facing towards the bridge and facing towards a crossing down here so that I could run them over into the neutral zone as quickly as possible and then maybe get them to survive in there. That was the plan anyway. I think I made maybe one mistake here. Maybe. Manuel's infantry was comparatively weak to my Gurkhas. Almost all things are, but he was not going to be able to hurt me a lot. So maybe I should have deployed all my Gurkhas in like a line here and then just move them up into that center as an attacking force going straight into his deployment zone, straight for his infantry up in the blob where he had deployed. I think I could have done that and maybe gotten a better result than I did. Not really sure, but it was a possibility. What happened then is the preparatory bombardment comes down, we both roll, we both get it. I pin down most of Manuel's army in his deployment zone, which is good for me because his shirkas will not be able to move, and they did get stuck there for quite a lot of the game. It was really difficult for him to move his infantry into the neutral zones and then on into my zone. That was not really possible. But yeah, my own infantry and my trucks get hit by his artillery bombardment as well, and I lose my my Piat team. They got hit. One of them died, and I lost the morale test. They fled, and I lost one of the trucks, which meant that I was 2 dice down before the game had started. I was losing before turn 1. So that was rough. That was really rough. It was a bad start, and that pushed me into making more and more desperate decisions. I had to try and catch up all the time. So my plan was that I wanted to push my Gurkhas up towards that house there where I thought that Manuel might not be able to shoot at it because his own infantry was pretty close to it. And I might use that house as sort of an anchor to either push into his infantry or to push into his deployment zone and score points. Then the other infantry here, I wanted to run them over here, like that, to counter what he had pushed in of infantry in that deployment zone so that I could push into his deployment zone again. And then I wanted to run my armor and my trucks, my Dhaka jeeps, everything from the neutral zone into his deployment zone. I thought that I would be able to handle that infantry there pretty nicely with what I had. I had a lot of machine guns, right? Dhaka stewards and Dhaka jeeps, all of that shit. So I thought I would be able to handle that. And I did. Even though in turn 3, I lost 1 steward to indirect fire, and the other steward got pinned, and the final steward did not come on. So from turn 3 to turn 5, 6, my stewards were not on the table, really. I was fighting without them, more or less. My Dhaka jeeps and the stewards try to move up here, and they do handle the infantry. The final bit of infantry, I charged them in the... You can't see anything. The final bit of Manuel's infantry gets charged around or in this building, and I wipe them out using that 1 unit of Gurkhas. But unfortunately, the Gurkhas over here, I only get 1 of those units to move towards his house. So that's why I'm thinking maybe I should have put all 3 of the Gurkha units there and let the armor handle whatever infantry was over on the other side. I sort of get stuck, and then I get shot at by Manuel's reserves, which, as expected, come in here in huge amounts. His motorcycles and his tanks with those multi-rocket launchers, and all of that shoot at my Gurkhas. At the same time, he tried to get all of his infantry to shoot at my Gurkhas. So my Gurkhas sort of get pinned down. They start losing men. And then when I finally charge one of the units, there's only 3 guys left, and I lose the close combat. So, yeah. And at that point, I'm really not able to stop his motorized, his armor from moving in. I make the desperate decision at that point to take one of my stewards and move it into my own zone. And it moves in, and it actually kills one of his tanks. And I try to kill the second tank, but I don't manage to do that. It was a desperate ploy to try and pull some of his stuff out of my zone. But at that point, I am into his zone with most of my flanking units. My center push has been stopped. I still have 1 unit of Gurkhas going down in the neutral zone, but I can't manage to push them up because they're being shot at non-stop. And his motorcycles and 2 of his tanks are in my zone. So it ends up being a 19-24 victory to Manuel, something like that. It was a convincing victory, but one in which I felt that I was doing well most of the game, considering the list and the table I was up against. My decisions were kind of the right ones most of the time, maybe except for that push through the center. I was behind from turn 1 because I lost those 2 dice at the start, which I never really caught up to. So that's how it goes when you play top players. Congratulations on the victory, Manuel. Unfortunately for me, that meant that I placed horribly in that tournament, but I really enjoyed our game. That was one of the best games I've had for a long time. You're such a nice opponent, and I look forward to seeing you at the WTC in Cork. Cheers.